Hey everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Inn. I'm the Innkeeper here in the workshop, and this time, instead of taking a look at a single class like in our Artificer video, which by the way I plan to update once Rising from the Last War comes out, I've decided to take a broader, more conceptual look at one of the most popular homebrew classes out there, the Shaman. While working on the script for the next Innkeeper video, I started thinking about commonly requested homebrew classes by fans, and the Shaman was clearly one of the top contenders. The Unearthed Arcana Reddit and the DMs Guild are filled with dozens of fan-made Shaman classes, all with different interpretations of the class's abilities and even themes. This video is going to be a brief exploration of the Shaman and how I think it's best to introduce it to 5th edition, focusing on two Shaman classes I have had experience with, the Shaman class by Michael Wolf and the Shaman class by a fellow YouTuber, Dawnforgedcast. This selection is obviously very subjective. You may have experience with a different Shaman class, but I had to draw the line somewhere and I chose to stick with what I know. Plus, I feel that these two classes each do well to highlight some of the key class design philosophies I am going to be discussing in this video. Firstly, I believe that any good class, homebrew or not, needs to be successful in creating two identities for itself, a mechanical identity and a visual or thematic identity. This means that the class needs to be able to tonally and visually distinguish itself from other classes through unique lore and flavour, and simultaneously offer them a unique play experience through its features that cannot be replicated by any other class. To use some officially published examples, the Sorcerer in 5e I consider to have great flavour to it. It ties your character's magic to their heritage rather than have it be taught or bestowed like other classes. That's its thematic distinction, and it creates unique stories. However, its mechanical identity isn't as strong. Many consider its metamagic options not well balanced between themselves, and in addition, their very limited spells known don't live up to the promise of the class being the most versatile caster. The class has a strong flavour, weaker mechanics. I'm not saying that the Sorcerer class is bad here. I like it, and just a few small changes can go a long way to fixing the mechanical problems the class has. My point is just to illustrate how important a strong thematic identity is in class creation. People play Sorcerers because they offer a unique story for their characters that other classes don't, despite it widely considered to be weaker than other full casters. On the flip side, I'd argue that the Hexblade Warlock subclass has a weak thematic identity, but a strong mechanical identity. Having your patron be a sentient weapon with some fairly irrelevant Shadowfell lore doesn't stand out in the slightest, especially when compared to making a pact with the devil, a powerful archfey, or Cthulhu himself. Yet it is the most played Warlock subclass according to D&D Beyond, and while that data obviously has flaws, it isn't entirely inaccurate in my play experience either. The class's mechanics are so strong that it carves out a nice niche as being the go-to melee caster in the game, when you're looking to optimize at least, making up for its, in my opinion, lack of flavour. A Shaman class then needs to have a unique mechanical and thematic identity. We'll get to their mechanical identity a bit later when we discuss the two Shaman classes, but for now let's take a look at the Shaman's thematic identity, starting with their real-world roots. Shamanism is a religious system whereby individuals or communities worship otherworldly beings and spirits rather than a god or pantheon of gods. A shaman acts as a link between our world and the spirit world, their knowledge and connection to this other world supposedly granting them mystical powers like being able to heal illnesses, contact the souls of dead ancestors, even predict future events and change the weather, though of course these all vary depending on what specific culture you're talking about. Communication between the material and spiritual worlds often comes in the form of a shaman interpreting omens, or by entering a spiritual trance whereby they receive visions from the other world. Often this latter process is helped along by hallucinatory drugs or concentrated meditation, culminating with a shaman entering into a state of ecstasy through which the messages of the spirits are interpreted, though this last bit is often left out in more child-friendly interpretations of the practice. Shamanism is often associated with indigenous and tribal societies like those found in Asia, South America, Africa, and even parts of Europe. While very few tribes still follow the practice today, it was once widespread and formed the center of many cultures' religious systems, which is often why shamans are represented as being in positions of power within these societies, as they take the place of the medical doctor and the religious leader. Most forms of shamanism are tied to a broader belief known as Animism, or the idea that everything in the world, living or not, possesses a life force or spirit. Not only do humans and animals have spirits, but trees, rivers, and even rocks. The Dungeon Master's Guide has a great passage on animism at the beginning of the book I recommend you check out if you want to know more. It's a really fascinating belief system and has a lot of roleplay opportunities that we'll get into later. But because of this belief, shamans don't just commune with the spirits of animals and the deceased. A shaman might appeal to the spirits of the sky for a clear day, the spirits of the ocean for safe travel, or the spirits of a field for good harvest. If we take this perception of a shaman and distill it down, I'd argue that we're left with a few core ideas that a shaman class would need to channel in order to be thematically consistent with this view of a shaman. The class would need to have a sense of nature and tribalism, probably similar to a barbarian, a connection with spirits or another world, and a focus on religion, healing, and divination magic. But of course, there are many different portrayals of shamans out there, and the real world equivalent of a thing rarely perfectly matches how it is portrayed in the media we consume. Personally, the depiction of shamans my view has most been shaped by is Brother Bear.
I don't speak bear.
However, I believe that at least in the gaming community, one depiction of shamans stands above all the rest in its prevalence and influence. It's time to talk about the granddaddy of all MMORPGs. Shamans in World of Warcraft certainly take inspiration from their real-world counterparts, keeping their tribalism roots and the theme of a strong connection to the land and spirits. But in the lore of the world, they added in a specific relationship with the 4 elements, and what I believe is something like a sentient elemental chaos? I got a few of my friends who are big WoW players, as well as one who has almost exclusively played shamans, to try and explain the lore of shamans in the game to me, and look, I'm not going to pretend that even after it all, I fully understand it, but to my knowledge, the function of shamans in the world is pretty much the same as what we've established, just being so far up its own lore-filled arse that nothing is accessible to a non-WoW scrub like me. They still commune with spirits of the land and call upon the powers of elemental spirits to use their magic, so really the important distinction with the WoW Shaman is its focus on the 4 elements. This is something Blizzard added in themselves and has no real world bearing, but the influence of WoW is so widespread that to many people the 4 elements are central to what a shaman is, even if they didn't get that idea from WoW directly. This is of course totally fine, great ideas often come from taking an existing idea and transforming it in a new way, but it is just worth noting that the Elementalist Shaman is a WoW or at least gaming specific idea. While obviously there are other influential depictions of shamans out there, I am far from a shaman expert and I'm just basing this off my subjective experience. To me, these are the 2 views of shamans I have most commonly encountered, and I think the WoW Elementalist Shaman is so popular that to many players, a shaman wouldn't be complete without the inclusion of things like the 4 elements and, to a lesser degree, totems. So I'm going to add those to the list of the core shaman ideas that I outlined earlier. Now, at this part of the original video, I was going to launch into an in-depth look at the various shaman depictions throughout D&D's history, but then I realised this video is already going to run long, and while interesting, the history of the class doesn't really add to my overall point here, so I cut the entire segment. I'll just say there has been a shaman in some form in every edition of D&D, even though some have pretty tenuous connections to what a shaman actually is. But now it's time to look at some actual shaman classes, namely the Shaman Class by Michael Wolf, available on the DM's Guild, and the Shaman Class by Dawnforged Cast, another D&D channel on YouTube I'm sure you're all aware of. Wolf's Shaman was one of the very first homebrew classes I ever came in contact with when I was just a sprightly young'un of 18, just getting into D&D. This class is a charisma-based full caster that uses a new point-based casting system known as Spirit Magic. You have a number of spirit points equal to your level, and you can expend a number of points equal to the level of the spell you want to cast, with your spirit points refreshing on a short rest similar to Warlock. This is an interesting casting mechanic and probably the class's main unique feature, because apart from this, the class shares a lot of similarities with Warlock. Getting invocations at level 2, a spiritual gift like the Warlock's Pact Boons at level 3, and Hidden Lore, which is just a renamed Mystic Arcanum. While on one hand, Spirit Magic is weaker than the Warlock's Pact Magic at many levels, for example at level 5 the Shaman can only cast 1/3 and 1 second level spell, rather than 2 3rd level like the Warlock, the added versatility of being able to cast those lower level spells makes the system overall more desirable in my opinion, and it's different enough to distinguish it from the Warlock. But where this class really shines is in its flavour and how it frames your interactions with spirits. The author goes into fantastic detail about the personality of spirits and how your character can interact with them, conjuring forth vibrant images of your shaman chatting idly to the spirit of a campfire, or listening to the whispers of trees in a forest. Each subclass, known as Shamanic Callings, focuses on one of the core ideas of the shaman that I outlined earlier. The Speaker of Ancestors keys into the tribalism and spirituality central to the real-world shamans. The Speaker of Dreams deals with interpreting dreams in a much more witch doctory-like way. The remaining 4 subclasses are each given to one of the 4 elements, tying in with the idea of the shaman as the elementalist as well. These subclasses all have fantastic flavour and are unique from each other. Each even has their own obeisance, which is like a code of conduct between the shaman and the spirits of that particular subclass. Ancestor Shamans follow a code that emphasises family and tradition. Dream Shamans are creative storytellers whose grasp on reality is a lot looser than some may be comfortable with. Speaker of Flames Shamans understand how to deal with the impatient and unpredictable fire spirits. The subclasses make it clear how much of an impact the spirits have on how a shaman acts, and how the character is defined by what spirits they choose to interact with. Yes, the obeisance is very similar to the Paladin's Oaths, but in this instance, I don't actually mind it. This class, I believe, is actually much more successful at using the codes to give boundaries to the character's roleplay than the Paladin is, because it still provides enough room for variation and creativity without being stifling. So in my opinion, this class nails the thematic distinction it needs to stand on its own, but unfortunately it falters when it comes to giving itself a unique mechanical identity as well. I can buy the class using Charisma instead of the traditional Wisdom. The stat is weaker overall, so it doesn't cause any balance issues, and the class has a heavy focus on roleplay with the spirits, so it makes sense for them to use Charisma to avoid Mad. But while, as I said, the new spirit mechanic is unique enough to stand on its own, the rest of the class features aren't. The class's progression and features are just too similar to the Warlocks for me to be comfortable with. They get the choice of 2 spiritual gifts at 3rd level, with the gift of Savagery being a slightly altered Pact of the Blade feature, and the gift of Sight being literally the Diviner Wizard's Portent's ability lifted word for word. Now, I don't deny that Portent makes sense, with the Shamans being magic witch doctors who could tell the future, but I don't like the idea of lifting signature abilities from other classes and subclasses. It lessens the value of both classes by making their niche less prominent. Looking at your smites, Hexblade Warlock. Instead, a good homebrew should find something else similar in tone, but different enough mechanically to stand on its own. To a degree, the mechanical and thematic identities that I've been talking about need to be applied to the features within a class as well as the class itself in a sort of turtles all the way down situation. Some more examples of this shaman's borrowed abilities are how it gets the druid's timeless body feature at 18th level, the Speaker of Ancestors getting the cleric's turn undead and control undead features, and the Archfey Warlock's Dark Delirium, as well as a large number of the class's invocations. Now, normally when a homebrew steals a bunch of features like this, it's a sign of lack of creativity and effort, which is why I'm so puzzled by this class, because so much effort has clearly been put into it, it just seems strange to steal abilities. And the abilities that aren't stolen, while many could use some rewording in my opinion, are really cool. The 14th level abilities of each subclass in particular are all unique and thematic. The Speaker of Stones can petrify creatures. The Speaker of Waters can project their reflection onto bodies of water, casting them across entire oceans. And the Speaker of Winds can create storms that teleport you between locations. And it's for this reason that I'm so mixed about this class. I genuinely believe it comes so close to being a fantastic homebrew, and in the flavor category, in my opinion, it goes above and beyond even the quality of the core classes. But I'm just not sold on the mechanics and how much it borrows from other sources. That said, if that fact doesn't bother you all that much, this class is a well-balanced and very thematically unique class that certainly shouldn't break anything at your table, so feel free to use it. What I certainly can recommend is the Spirit supplement that Michael Wolf has also released alongside the class. It doesn't introduce any new mechanics or subclasses, but it elaborates even further on the flavour of the core class. It details how Animism works in a D&D world, various different spirits like the spirits of places, and even more abstract concepts like the spirits of ideas. If you are looking to play a shaman of any variety, I highly recommend you check out the supplement to enhance your roleplay and really give you a feel for what the shamanic view of the world has to offer. It really is just a shame that more effort wasn't put into making the class's mechanics as unique as its flavour is. Michael Wolf's Shaman can be purchased from the DM's Guild as a pay what you want document, so please consider dropping him a couple of dollars to support him. The next shaman we'll take a look at is probably the best known, published by Dawnforged Cast. This class is unabashedly inspired by the mechanics and flavour of the WoW Shamans, and I can say right now, if you want to play a WoW Shaman in D&D, this is the class for you. It is a wisdom-based caster that, like Wolf's Shaman, takes heavy inspiration from Warlock and uses a very slightly altered form of the Pact magic called Totem magic to cast spells. At least this class doesn't straight up copy the Warlock invocations though. Instead they have a feature creatively called Shaman Totems. You plant totems as an action on your turn, and once activated they grant benefits to allies or damage enemies within their aura. Depending on what subclass you choose, you'll also get buffs known as boosts when you use your totems, incentivizing you to play into that subclass's strengths but not limiting you if you want to move outside them, which is nice. If the parallels to the WoW Shaman aren't already obvious, the three subclasses are all called the same as their WoW counterparts. Totemic Enhancement focuses on damage and melee combat, Totemic Elementalism focuses on elemental damage and related abilities, and Totemic Restoration is the healer and support subclass. Some of the class's totems and boosts vary from helpful to borderline broken, especially when combined with their relevant subclasses. The Sky Fury totem increases everyone's critical hit range. The Stone Skin totem grants everyone resistance to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. The Wind Fury totem especially puts everyone under the effects of essentially a haste spell. While most of the more obviously powerful totems aren't available until higher levels, much like Warlock invocations, some of the abilities are still pretty bonkers. If you want a full breakdown of the class, Dawnforged has a big analysis video that he released alongside the class. So if it sounds like something you'd be into, I recommend checking out that, as he kind of does my job for me of analysing the core points of the class. What I can say is this class has one major benefit to Wolf's Shaman. It has a unique, useful feature that makes the class mechanically distinct in play. Totem magic works great to distinguish the class and give you a play experience that can't be replicated by anything currently out there, and I feel it's a lot more complete from a gameplay perspective. Also, the document looks a lot nicer, and I'm a sucker for art and well laid out homebrew. However, this class falters where Wolf's shone. Its flavour. Clearly a lot of time was spent refining the mechanics of the class, and not much thought was put into the class descriptions. Very little flavour text is used, especially compared to Wolf's mammoth offering, and I think this is because they just assumed people buying the class would know what a shaman was from WoW, so they didn't need to bother telling them what they already knew. Which, might have been right, but it would have been nice for someone like me to have, especially because 5e has set a pattern of its subclasses all having really specific places in the world tied to their abilities. Gloomstalker Rangers are from the Underdark, College of Whispers Bards are duplicitous schemers, Ancestral Guardian Barbarians are, well, angry shamans. But how does an enhancement shaman differ from a restoration shaman in the world? How are they visually and tonally distinct? This is the kind of flavour I would have really liked to give me a better idea of what the class would look like in play, rather than just how it would act like in play. The Dawnforged Shaman class can be purchased from his site for $3.50 US. So, having looked at both classes, which do I prefer? My gut tells me to go with Wolf's Shaman, but I just can't see myself liking the abilities in play. While the Dawnforged Shaman can be played perfectly fine as is, you have to do a lot of the heavy lifting flavour-wise. So in my opinion, if you want to play a Shaman class, I recommend you take Wolf's Spirit Supplement and use the flavour in it to build your Dawnforged Shaman around. However, I use neither of these supplements at my table. At least I don't offer them to my players outright. And that's because I'm personally not sold on the idea that the Shaman needs an entirely separate class. Hear me out. Let's take a look at the core ideas relating to the Shaman that I outlined before. Nature and tribalism, spirits, support magic, elemental magic, and totems. These two classes both hit these core ideas. But ask yourself, what other class that already exists in the game also hits these ideas? If it's not obvious, it's the Druid. Both classes are themed around the natural world and appear in tribalistic settings. Druids interact with the spirits of the world as called out in their player's handbook flavor text. I swear that somewhere in the Druid's flavor text it called out Animism specifically, but I can't for the life of me find it when making this video, so if any of you know where it is, let me know. Or maybe I'm just insane and dreamt it up or something. But regardless, this connection with the natural world can very easily be interpreted as a form of animistic worship where the forces of nature are simply spirits. I'll also point out how the text does explicitly call out the Druid's unique connection with the four elements, and how their spell list includes pretty much every elemental spell in the game. Their spell list also includes top-tier healing spells like Healing Word, Cure Wounds, Healing Spirit, and more. In 5e, a Druid can easily fulfill the role of a healer and support in place of a cleric. Druids can use totems as their spellcasting focus, and the Circle of the Shepherd subclass from Xanathar's Guide to Everything uses spirit animal totems as their main feature, which you can easily reflavor into something else if you'd like. So flavour-wise, the Shaman and the Druid overlap very heavily, and that's why I don't believe that the Shaman has a unique enough thematic identity to be a whole new class. But, as this video has already established, that's only half of what makes a class. Do Druids also have the mechanical overlap that would invalidate the need for a Shaman? It's complicated, but in short, no. And I think that's why so many Shaman classes running around. While the Circle of Shepherd Druids use totems and deal with spirits, the core Druid class doesn't so much, at least not in a mechanical sense. In addition, it lacks a lot of divine and more general divination magic that would make sense for shamans to have, things like remove and bestow curse, or speak to dead, so people have made classes that include those things. But I think both of these problems can be fixed with new Druid subclasses, not an entirely new class that is mostly going to tread the same ground as the Druid. Once I realised this, I went ahead and drafted up some subclasses to do just that, the Circle of Elements and the Circle of Spirits, which I will link to down below. These two may not hit the shaman flavour you're going for exactly, but I think they go a long way towards it and don't risk bringing an entirely new class to your table. Of course, and I'm going to end on this, you can totally disagree with me on this. A sound argument exists that while Wizards themselves is choosing to be very picky with their releases, that's why Homebrew exists, to be free of the constraints the creators impose on themselves. I actually understand that, and to a level I agree with you. So if you want to introduce a full Shaman class to your games, go ahead. It's your game, your rules. And how I choose to run my table is not the same as how you choose to run yours. I've given you a ton of great options to explore when it comes to playing a shaman in your game. Now it's up for you to decide which one suits your table the best. Until next time, I am the Innkeeper, this is the Workshop, and thank you for staying with us here at the Dungeon Inn.